Welcome to Teatro Absurdo with Huilo Marvavilla, brought to you by Jaguar Bridge Productions and The Great Mystery. Well, hello there, podcasters. Welcome to Teatro Absurdo. I'm Willow Marvavilla, and this is Series 3. Welcome aboard to that which is ludicrous, preposterous, crazy, and if you're lucky,
So, hi, Lucia Comnes.
Hi, good to see you.
I'm Willow Marvavilla, or Chaz, or a lot of other names. And I have Lucia here with me because she's coming to New York City to be a part of the Jaguar Portals show, exhibition, and indie film fundraiser for the film Cries of a Jaguar. And so I wanted to introduce you to Lucia. And so first, Lucia, why not just a 2-second, how did we meet? And what was that magic like?
Well, I remember distinctly, I was driving south on Highway 101 from Central California. And I think I was probably 18 or 19 years old. I just listened to this radio, some kind of public radio program about the whales and dolphins hemorrhaging from their ears and eyes because of naval sonar being tested in the oceans. And I was in bits. I mean, I'd been crying. I didn't know what to do with myself. And I remember, I think I stopped, in Petaluma, and I went to a coffee shop and I walked in, and there were these incredible, colorful, powerful paintings of whales and dolphins on the walls. And I was like, this is crazy. And it was almost like this healing salve for what I just had heard. And I think I was having a drink and then asking about the art. And then you were there and you were like, I'm the artist. And that's how we met. That's my memory of our first meeting.
Great. Well, close enough. I think what I remember is it was an open mic night too, or something in relation to that, because it was specifically, I remember hearing you play, and just, when artists start off, it's hugely not spectacular like what you see on social media. It's very isolated, risk-taking, lonely sometimes. But the two of us just connected in that moment. And then what is the segue that brings us, well, what are we, 23 years later, to collaborate, how artists collaborate. So I asked you, I said, hey, I'm also doing this gig in San Francisco, or maybe it was Santa Cruz at the time, with Caroline Casey. And do you want to participate? And you were like, yeah. So subsequently, that was when we got your siren song for the whale, a very potent poetry, spoken word, music composition. So here we are today, and I just want the audience to know that in this magical way, when we could, Lucia and I have been to and froing for years, not so much with our art physically, publicly in the last decade, because I was in Costa Rica creating an artist in residency center. So I want to move this over a little bit more to Lucia so you all can get to know her better. I believe you were in Costa Rica a long time ago, right?
Yes.
Do you
yeah.
want to share anything about that?
Yeah, I was in Costa Rica it would have been 2003 or 2004, something like that. So yeah, that would have been 20 years ago. And I did a study abroad program, and I lived with the family, and I learned Spanish, and I was studying you know, kind of you know, I studied anthropology and I was studying Latin American, Central American history, environmental studies. I mean, it was just a very, very rich experience. I lived in the country for 6 months with another group of, you know, young students, university age students. We all had host families, and then we went on these field trips, and we were meeting with all sorts of, you know, local experts and in various domains. And so a memory that really stands out is we went to an indigenous community in the Pacific side, on the Pacific side in the jungle, very, very rural area. And we stayed there for a weekend, and we were hosted by, you know, kind of like you describe, kind of like I don't know what this official title is in their culture, but it was like a chief, and he was a medicine man, and we were actually hosted in his home, and he took us on a walk through the jungle, and you know, and was like describing how the plants, you know, plants had, many of them had medicinal qualities, and he would point out, if you look at the shape of the leaf of this plant, you can see which organ that it's there for. I mean, it just had this very direct connection with the plants and the animals, and was trying to make that accessible to us, and in a very simple, down to earth, accessible way. And it just made so much sense, and it was very profound at the same time. And you know, that's just one experience that stands out, just spending that weekend in the jungle there with someone who really knows the medicinal and healing qualities of the jungle and the plants and the animals, and having a direct experience of that. You know, that was it gave me an experience of connection to a place that I, you know, really was foreign to me. You know, I didn't grow up in a jungle, and it felt very exotic. And yet there I felt totally connected, and you know, able to access the knowledge of those plants that were foreign to me. So yeah, that was something I'll always remember.
Thank you. I want to just ask one more note on that, because Costa Rica is very popular. And what I want to express here is certainly I love Costa Rica. I spent 13 years there. My first trip was probably a little more than a decade before you. It was in 1990. It was in an earthquake. But I'm wondering, in 2003, do you remember music from Costa Rica? Anything specifically? Like what I remember personally, is I remember the sound of marimba music. It used to be in the Zocolos. Like I remember in San Jose, there was a big old hotel called the Grand Hotel, and they had a fern bar, and these old guys would just play marimba. So it was really integrated into me that, oh, this is part of the musical, the lyric energy of Costa Rica. Do you remember any of that or something else?
No, I didn't have that experience. That sounds amazing. The music, I studied guitar when I was there, and I learned like the kind of classical Latin American popular song, and you know, political song, and you know, that there were a lot of songs in Spanish that I remember. And then I was with wonderful people who lived very, you know, pure and simple lifestyle, and they listened to a lot of reggae music. So I remember reggae. And then in these communities, in the indigenous communities, I remember, you know, flutes and ocarinas, and definitely that was, and rattles, you know, shakers. Those were the sounds like that, you know, that I experienced.
Great. Well, let's do a little sidebar then. You speak of the flutes. Recently, I sent you a clip of my friend Alejandro Solis. He's in the film Cries of a Jaguar. I get a little emotional. He was very inspiring to me. I knew him from my first days of arriving in 2010, years ago, and he has taken upon himself to reclaim indigenous flute making. You watched an hours-long sequence of him sharing his story, and you said you were so moved. Do you want to just bounce off of that?
Yeah, well, it was beautiful. I loved, I felt like I was right there with all of you, in his workshop and walking through the forest and the jungle. And so I just felt like it was it transported me right there. And he clearly, I remember in his story, he said that he at some point stopped going to school, and yet he seems to be like an expert in flute making and flute music and the power of flute music from all over the world. So he was, referencing flute making styles and flute, performance styles from many different cultures, Native American, Indian, you know, um, East Asia, and various parts of Latin America. So I was really impressed by that. And then he told this beautiful story of how the first flute was made. So, um, a man lost the love of his life and ended up, not knowing how to survive, and in the forest, and heard wind blowing through a hollow branch, and that was the first flute. And then he performed this beautiful flute music, and as I was watching, all of a sudden I was taking these deep breaths, and I was just being transformed by the music and those sounds. And then he was talking about how powerful, the healing power of sound, and how it can also be used to harm, and depending on the flute maker and intentions of the flute maker, and the one, those playing, like, it just has the power to heal or the power to create disease. And, just, it's very rare to hear someone talk about that. And it really resonated with me. And, he was so down to earth and gentle. I just found myself really opening up to him. So yeah, thank you.
Great. So two things I want to merge out of that. One, that Alejandro, as you know, is sending 3 of those flutes from Costa Rica to New York City. May they arrive well, and spelling customs, so just let them go. I think they're made from bamboo and cedar. They are varnished. One of the things I saw about his flutes, so those of you that will be able to see them, 2 of them will be auctioned off to help fundraise for the film. What do you call it when they have different cylinders? Like, one of them has 3 columns and the others have 2. And so they actually create double notes. I don't know if I'm saying
Yeah.
that right.
Oh yeah. He gave a great description of that, how, when 2 notes are played, especially in unison, that a third vibration that's actually not being played is created in the brain. And actually that accesses parts of you, your your neurons, your neurology, but your soul, that you can't access at the surface level. And so it helps you get in touch with yourself. And we all are healers, so our bodies know what they need to heal, and that helps activate that part of ourselves inside.
Right, that's fantastic. Because I know the 3-cylinder, 3-column flute, he said that it was so special, that third note, that it actually goes into the heart chakra. And I think that's what was being activated. So let's move over to sound scoring for film. And this is something I really want to focus on in this chat, is that the process and the to and froing that goes on. So we'll get to how Alejandro's flute sounds may be part of the soundscape now, but I want to talk about when I first approached you. And, this is what artists do. This is sometimes when we also, I think as artists, at least for me, from my perspective, is sometimes we have to, or the invitation is to sort of place our egos over here and put the magic of creativity together for larger purposes or projects such as this. So I approached you, I don't know, a couple years or so ago, that you had known of the terrible experiences that I've had with violence in Costa Rica. I'm one person. There are many people in Costa Rica, in Central America, all over the world experiencing violence. But this was very specific in that it related to the protection of critical biospheres. And so since you had wrapped your head around the whales and Monterey Bay and all this, so, and I love your work. And this is when artists really flare together. And bless your heart, you never turn me down, even though my art is funky. But I think as we grow and mature, our art always finds its audience. So can you elaborate a little bit about your process? Let's talk about first Pura Vida, which I think folks out there, I'm not releasing too much of it yet. We will a little bit to tease you in, but I think it's going to be a hit song. That our process and what we did, what you remember of it. Like first you say, well, tell me your story, what you want to include, because this is actually writing the lyrics for a song. And then what your process was to start get the beats and which instrument to choose, as much as you want to share in a, capsulized moment.
Yeah, well, I just want to first say I'm always so honored when you want to include me and invite me to be part of whatever you're putting together. And you've done that from the beginning. And I've always looked up to you as an artist and someone who's so courageous and, masterful and dedicated to your work. So how can I say no to that? And you also have really, you've really followed my work and as an artist, and my songs, and you've listened to my, my catalog, and I'm just like, that makes me so happy.
23 years.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so lucky that that I have you as a supporter as well. So it's a privilege to collaborate with you. And then I have the personal connection to Costa Rica, and so it's a place I would have loved to go back to many times, and I had so many rich experiences there. And so this has been such a wonderful opportunity to reconnect with all of that inside of me that lives on, but I haven't been able to go back. So so it's been great. And that's really where I learned to speak Spanish. So I wanted to also, I was like, well, definitely some of the songs have to be in Spanish. And that was a great challenge for me, because I've been living in Italy for 10 years. And so I'm in Italian world, and my Spanish has just been like over there buried under the ground. So I've gotten to dig it out a bit. So yeah, I mean, songwriting is like writing a 3-minute film with like 20 words. Right. So I get it, to do a film, and every little song is a short film. So I remember talking to you, and I wanted to when you asked me to start writing music for the film, I really wanted to dig deeper and understand some of the most important parts of the story. And you really conveyed how Pura Vida is this, motto for Costa Rica, and it has it's being used in so many different ways, but then it has this kind of spiritual or mantra at the core. It's coming from a really pure place, but then it's been, exploited for all these various campaigns for tourism and, commercial endeavor. So I wanted to use that. And then I remember we had conversations, and you shared videos and you shared your story, and that was all marinating. And then it was around Christmas time, and I was here in Lucca, where I live in Italy. And it was the first Christmas season I'd spent alone. I had just, come out of a couple of really important relationships, and it wasn't an easy time for me, but it was a great time to create music. And so you gave me this great invitation, like, write some songs for this film. And I was like, yes, great, I'm going to do it. And I was just there, and like, that song kind of just came through. I didn't work at it. It was like, we'd set it all up. We'd put all the pieces together, and it had been marinating. And then I just kind of sat down, and, maybe I listened to some Latin music, but but I know, you know, you were very clear. You wanted guitar, you wanted it to be upbeat, you wanted Pura Vida in it. So you gave me some really great, you know, components to work with, which was really, really helpful. And then,
Right.
and so I started by writing the chorus in Spanish and the verses in English. And now that we're working towards the show, I've felt inclined to rewrite the verses in Spanish, and that's been great too.
Excellent. One of the most amazing things, I mean, as we know in film, I've been reminded that 80% of most films we watch is music. And that music is what goes into the heartstrings. It keeps you invested because the music in some ways allows you to start to feel into the characters and what they're going through, all of it, you know, the horror, the love, the frustration, the mystery. So one of the things I want to really build kudos, I mean, you know, in the original and what we've worked up to this day is, and when I posture this song to friends is, I love the trickster quality. And this is mastery to me in songwriting for film and specifically in general, because it also is indicative of Latin American music and culture and magical realism and, you know, the gesture. So I gave you harsh details, you know, of a kidnapping, a lover beating, you know, this juxtaposition that where did Pura Vida go wrong? And Pura Vida is the catchphrase. It kind of means like cool, everything's okay. And in your song, it's such a jaunty song. You know, like you want to dance, you want to sing, and I'm like, but wow, those lyrics are like, I wouldn't say they're dark, they're just sincere. So do you want to speak to just that quality of songwriting, that it has this ability to also convey hard topics, you know? So anything?
I mean, yeah, I think that music can be a safe space to feel it all, right? And so, I mean, my job is not to get in the way of that, you know. I think that the chorus in that song, well, the music had to be rhythmic and it had to move, because if the more painful and hard something is, the more, you know, you need the movement and the power of the rhythm to carry that forward, you know. So that's really, really important. It's kind of like to purify, there's like, you have to burn something to purify, right? You know, we burn Palo Santo and sage if we're purifying a space, right? So there's got to be fire in that rhythm and that song if we're going to come out pure at the end, like purify all of that dark, you know, difficult, you know, negative emotion, which is all there in the events. Just the events that happen is, you know, they're not easy to watch or to experience or to remember. But and then the chorus, I really do like the chorus, like, you know, lyrically as well. You know, dilo como es la pura vida. So say it how it is, the pura vida, which means pure life, you know, good life, a pure life. Dilo como es la pura vida, a dura vida, una dura vida, a hard life. You know, to live a pure life, it's not easy. It's hard. It's hard shit, you know, doing your purification work or whatever. And then you know, in order to have para tener la pura, like, in order to have the pure life, para tener la pura vida, dura vida, in order to have the pure life, the hard life, hay que aceptar, like you have to accept it all, right? And that's somehow, I find, like when I'm writing and channeling, like a bigger, higher part of me comes through. Looking back at that chorus, like a few years later, I've been learning a lot about love in my personal life. And I'm like, yeah, that's what love is. It's accepting the difficult stuff, not just picking out the pure, nice stuff. It's like, you got to take it all and love it all. And whether that's in me or in a person that I love or a place. You know, that's what love really is. And you know, so you were talking about the heart center, and I remember my experiences in Costa Rica, and you know, there's a lot of love there. And people really love that place and that land and that culture, and you know, and there's a lot of wisdom in that you know came through the song and that I experienced when I was there. And I feel, you know, I hope that resonates with you.
Absolutely. And spinning off of that is, you know, I've emphasized to you what I find successful for me in certain songs such as this, and certainly for film, because songs written for film can become very successful later on, is the song is so catchy. Literally, you leave the room and you're singing it on the way home. You know, the Pura Vida, Dura Vida, it is that quality of song. So let's move over to the theme song, Cries of a Jaguar, the to and froing there, which is really potent as well, because there's a tremendous amount of metaphor in this film. I had expressed to you that I was visited by Indigenous grandmothers at one point who expressed to me that the center and areas like this in Costa Rica were considered what were called the Jaguar Bridges, these vortexes that were considered to bring together the eagle and the condor prophecies and myths, that these were these bridges to unite the masculine and feminine. So this was a little bit trickier of a composition, I think, for both of us. Certainly for me, because this one has to be moodier and more mysterious. And man, bless your heart. Again, I have goosebumps. You got it. So this is the riff between artists backstage. You know, when you see this on the screen, you have no idea. So this is what I wanted to share to the audience. So in Cries of a Jaguar, I told you, I said, I don't want cries to be like this. It's a crying out. It's a summoning. It's an invitation. And man, do you want to talk about your process with that? Because you catapulted it into this call to action song. You know, unite the heart and mind, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, no, it was a really great assignment. I mean, I really enjoyed, I love the magical realism and the way that you want to tell this story. And it's such a unique opportunity for me to be more poetic, you know, in lyrics, and also to be more, you know, like I don't get in commercial music songwriting often that this is why I want to do more with film, because there's so much more territory that you can work in. And so this is just it was such a great invitation. So yeah, I really dug into the symbol of the jaguar, and I loved writing like sensually about the jaguar, like the black and the glowing eyes and the polarities, right? We're talking about bridging polarities. And so that was great. And then it became a chant. And I created the soundscape first. I wanted to feel the jungle sounds and then the flute, and kind of this, you know, this like create a mood and a spell. And then there was kind of, you know, a single voice, you know, speaking, you know, singing a little bit on some of those themes. And then the drum beat came in, and then it became more like a chant, which is very powerful. If you're trying to do a call to action, like chanting and mantra is very powerful tool. So that's why I went in that direction. And it was, you know, reunite, unite, bridge the heart and mind. And, you know, the words really are, as you said, like just 10% at the top. It's really about that. You know, a chant can't be fancy. It's not meant to dazzle. It's meant to ground and give people an easy thing to sing along with, and give the mind something to, you know, to just get into a trance, pretty much, right? And this is the spell or the trance of reuniting polarities that are at war with each other in ourselves and in the world right now.
Fantastic. So in that, I just want to express, you know, an invitation to other artists that are wanting to write for film, and to look at this collaboration here between Lucia and I as a mentorship. Maybe we'll teach this one day, but here's something interesting, because I've worked with other musicians for getting songs. One person backed out because they felt threatened, their ego. And I think I can say this with comfort with you, is that, you know, when we're working together, she'll submit rough cuts, right? This is what we do. And then I give some comments, because she's checking in, because she reminded me right now I'm the acting director. And she's like, you know the film, you know what you want. So, and this has to be a little challenging for an artist, because you're putting your creativity out online too. But I remember that you sent me the rough cut of Cries of a Jaguar, and your voice did something very different in that first rough cut. It went up into this almost stance of ayahuasquero, a woman who sings the Icaros, which is the guiding energy, neural energy to move ayahuasca through your body. And I loved it. And then you sent a more produced version, which was great. However, I remember sitting in Costa Rica listening to this, and I was like, do I dare say to her, because you're a maestro, and say, I really like what you did in the rough cut? And I did. And now we're preparing for New York. So anything you want to speak to that, the process or the joy or the frustration?
Yeah, I mean, no, like I said, I'm probably really excited to have an opportunity to work on a film. And so I want it to be good, you know, which is the enemy of being like real, in the sense that what is good is all relative to what the story and the style is calling for, right? So, and that, so our egos, we have egos. Sometimes people are offended because they're like, I love this, and it's not working, and like, how can you not love my baby? That's not necessarily like the case for me, but I think, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna let you feel and see and hear the raw thing, but and then I'm gonna make it polished and make it good. And then you're like, no, I want the raw, like, this is the style of this film, is very raw, like, and so, I'm like, oh, but I want it to be professional and like cinematic and like, stand up to all of the whatever grant, Oscar-winning films. And like, hey, I'm getting a little overexcited there. They're like, so that's your job. You got to reel it back and be like, no, it can't be overly polished. It's not going to fit. That's stylistically, like, you're going off in another direction. Like, come back.
Well, okay, let's close this out and talk about what we're going to do in New York and what's happening there.
Yeah.
And if for some reason people can't make it to opening night, it's not important, because we will be filming the best we can that evening, that day, and ongoing when Lucia is in New York. Because what we're going to be doing now is I've invited her to create soundscaping for the film. So this is that ambient tone that people barely notice, but that is going on constantly underneath voiceovers and things like this. So I just wanted to speak to the process that we're actually in and still in, utilizing the sounds from Alejandro's flutes, which are just clips. He's not playing songs, but they're clips, which are great because those can be used in production. The sequences I have on birds and wildlife in Costa Rica, and that, again, you were like, well, we can get these, polished versions on Spotify or off of the web. And I was like, and I understand that. And I think there's yes, and it's like, yes, we can have the Cries of a Jaguar polished cinematic and also include some of the rough cut. I mean, the film's almost 2 hours long, so we're going to need a lot of music. But right now it's like, again, in our to and fro, you were like, do you really want this specific sounds that you sent me? Because they aren't polished. They're field recordings, which is basically you have a microphone out your window and you catch it with your cell phone. But I had expressed to her that why I kind of wanted, again, to keep some of the roughness of it, field quality, because it envelopes, it encases, it brings a person right there to the center in Costa Rica, what people heard there and what they were responding and asking me about. Like the oropendula, which I mentioned to you is this wild sound that's alien calls. The bellbird, which is threatened species. The howler monkeys, which are extinct in that area. And now we're to and froing and figure out how to put voice, chants, lyrics, not lyrics, but things. Do you want to talk about any part of your process? And we have about just a couple minutes and then a blessing, and then we'll close out.
Yeah, I think sometimes I think about like, I mean, I'm like such a sound sensitive person. So if I'm trying to take in art and then I'm hearing sounds, I'm so sensitive to that. But then if I hear the sound of a microphone, like, knock, or if I hear some kind of like, the microphone rubbing against some piece of clothing, that takes me out of the spell. And so I'm like, my challenge is like, how do we keep that real and raw, and also find that, sweet spot of not whatever other sounds that got in there that aren't necessarily meant to be there are not overly distracting. And so as a sound designer, there are definitely ways you can adjust that. That's not my wheelhouse, but I'll take my best stab at it.
Fantastic. And we do actually have someone in that wheelhouse who will be there, who perhaps will help us later on, and that's Ava Gracie, Persephone, who is a sound magician just trained. So, and last, we have just a couple minutes. I want to talk about, close this out with devotion to all our artist friends out there. And what you're seeing again, and what I want to emphasize is making art is not easy. It requires dedication, devotion, sacrifice. I mean, Lucia and I talked a couple of weeks ago, and I won't mention any names or any specific events, but I was horrified because she told me she was turning down a pretty spectacular experience in San Francisco in the Bay, a big pivotal opportunity perhaps for her musical career, but she also felt the importance of supporting her work in this film. And this is something I want to speak to, because indie film struggles sometimes with keeping people together, because film is a very long process, people. Are you learning that, Lucy? I mean, I always tell people this isn't a vanity video clip on TikTok. Some films take over 10 years to produce. That's why you see people at the Emmy or Oscars crying, sobbing, especially in documentary, because they're just like, do you want to close out with that about inspiration and devotion to artists? 1 minute.
Yeah,
What you learned, what helps you?
I learned, it was a big wake-up call for me the first time I produced my own music video, and the amount of energy, people, thought, resources that went into 3 seconds of that music video. One shot that lasts 3 seconds. It was unbelievable. And, and then you think about a feature film, and it just really opened my eyes. And I've never, thought about film the same way since. So it's amazing. In some ways it's absurd and frivolous, how much goes into making film. But at the other hand, it's like stories are the most important things we have. They are the things that transmit values. And art and music is what's going to save this planet and us humans from, being human. So we have to do it, and you have to be committed. And yeah, it's a high cost. It certainly is.
Well, we did it. They're going to cut us off because I'm not a Zoom member. I love you. We can take this off 2 seconds offline. But thank you, Lucia Comnes. Come to New York. Support this film, Cries of a Jaguar. Blessings. Pura vida, dura vida.
Pura vida.
Ciao, bella.
brought to you by Jaguar Bridge Productions, angels, guardians, guides, and perhaps a few demons if you're lucky, from the underworld. So tune in to us on all the major social circuits around the universe. Bye-bye.